You can't really practice acting. You know, it's sort of this ephemeral thing. It either happens or it doesn't. I mean, you can get ready before you come in, but it's not the same thing. It just happens or it doesn't in a moment.
So, hi everyone. This video that I have just shown, I came across the other day and it really interested me. And the very first person I thought of to speak to is the one and only Ava Robinson, my absolutely fabulous client, because Ava did a massive project for her independent research project on Ms. Meryl Streep herself. Hello, Ava.
Hello, Glynis.
Thank you so much for coming over and joining me on this. I really wanted to debate this topic with you because what a video clip. I know it's very short, but first of all, when you did your independent research project for Rose Bruford, tell me, what does it consist of?
So the independent research project, or the IRP, was pretty much the one of the final units or modules in my third year on the American Theatre Arts course, which is the course I graduated from. And it was very broad in so much that we were all tasked with choosing to examine, research, study an aspect of American theatre, which is, seems like an infinite task. But I had always been very, very, obsessed with Meryl Streep and her practice and adored her work. And even though she's known as predominantly a screen actress, I was like, how can I do this? So I had known that she had trained at Yale, but I was like, I swear she must have done theatre. And when I began my research, that is what I found. And so I had to frame my research, my argument almost, into how her origins in theatre, both training and on Broadway, shaped her practice and her legacy. I believe my overall title was. And so it was a few months, and it culminated in a 30-minute performance, which would have been in the Rose Theatre. However, this was in 2021, so still COVID era. So it was a project that I filmed, edited, everything from home, that I, of course, had the pleasure of sharing with you a year or so ago. And it was basically like 20 minutes of my thesis, so my argument, my research with supporting, facts, data, all of that, and then about 10 minutes of performance, during which I did a verbatim interview of Meryl when she was interviewed on CBS This Morning with Harry Smith, which she actually speaks to a lot of things that are mentioned in this video that you and I are discussing today, about her practice, what it means to work in theatre, her attitudes towards what acting is, how you teach acting, if you can even do that. And then the final scene was a 5-minute recreation of a scene of Mother Courage and her children that she performed on Broadway in 2006, I believe. Yeah. So that was the IRP. So yeah, very, very specific in what I found, but it was brilliant project to work on.
A massive deep dive, and I have to say thank you for sharing it confidentially with me, because you are absolutely astounding in it, and this is why I call you my baby Meryl. So the video, in that clip, Meryl Streep says that you can't practice acting. Let me have your thoughts on that.
I mean, initially, and it's not just because, because I reflected about, okay, why is it that I find myself agreeing with this? Is it because it's Meryl saying it and I'm maybe, brainwashed to believe whatever she says and take it as gospel? But actually, no, what she's saying And what she said in the interview that I studied for the IRP, which was, I believe, filmed in 1998, so sometime before this clip we're discussing today, it mirrors what I feel in myself, that I felt myself when I'm acting, when I'm rehearsing, all of that. And it's really like, if you break down the terminology, because she says you can't practice acting, and then you think, okay, well, what does the word practice mean? Is it rehearsal? Is it, you know, doing it for leisure or whatever? And then she says it happens or it doesn't in the moment. And then she sort of goes back on herself saying you can get ready, which to me is that very rehearsal and preparation, which is vital. And to me, I have found myself, and I would argue anyone else, if you don't have that base foundation of that preparation, of that line learning, you know, memorization, you know it inside out, you can spew it any which way, you can play with it, you can do it whatever way that rehearsal takes you and your director might take you. Without that, then you can't get that in the moment acting, which she claims either happens or it doesn't. So I definitely do think that there is a link between that practice or preparation, I'd like to call it, and it either happens or it doesn't. But when she says you can't practice it, I think to me she's speaking more about in the moment you can't pull it out of thin air, in so much that if the preparation isn't there, and yes, you have, I'm sure, you know, there are plenty of fantastic, you know, improv stars and, you know, artists who that's their livelihood and that's their craft, and they do that and they create those performances and they could be phenomenal. But I think in terms of the discipline of it, you can't do, like, you can't fabricate it without that fundamental preparation. And it makes me think of, I mean, it would have been in my first year at Rose Bruford, and I forget what class we were in. I think it was just like a standard realism class. And we were, funnily enough, on the topic of method acting and that whole, you know, can of worms. And, you know, of course, not grading anyone who's a method actor, of course. You know, whatever works for you. But the lecturer somehow specified two different means of acting, and one was inside out and the other was outside in. And for me personally, I'm 100% an inside out. And what that would mean, if you were to break that down, what I find it to mean for me is that everything comes from within. And that doesn't mean I'm, you know, I'm just making it up for whatever I see fit, but it means that text work, heavy text work. Like, I'm a very text-based actor, and I've had my course director, Stephen Dykes, who, you know, I think is fantastic, but he kind of drilled into us the significance of text, and everything you will ever need to know about your character lies in the text. And through that, when you do all that work and you know it, as I said before, then the character comes out. So it's sort of, you do the work as the actor within, and then at that moment of performance, that Meryl says, that moment of acting, that's when it comes out for the audience to see. Whereas in comparison, an outside in actor, we linked to that of a method actor, where we're in so much that it's all the external things. So what is my character wearing? What is the makeup? What are my circumstances? And if they live in that, you know, between shows or between takes or whatever, and it sort of consumes their external, then I think the psychology is then they believe that the character will exist for them internally. They will, if they've got all the outside factors, it will then exist for them, you know, in the mind inside. Which, you know, if again, this is not to disparage either method or a completely different method, but that is sort of how they were separated for each other. And it was like, like I get what that means. And it's sort of like, in a negative way, maybe it could be the outside in could be like faking it until you make it. I think you could like sum it up that way.
Okay, so interesting.
Mm.
Is the way you act inside out, does that have a name? Like, has that got like a separate name? Or
I'm sure people could, you know, more, you know, who study this far more than I would be able to classify it in some way. But I think the easiest way that I could categorize it is text-based, because my course director, who was very influential, had a fantastic working relationship together, who has been a writer director like in England and the States, like all round before being at Bruford, and still does. He is like the god of text, in so much that he, even though he wasn't enforcing it on us, he respected if students had a difference of opinion in terms of their chosen method. But he was so like David Mamet, how he famously would not let a single actor change a comma, a full stop, an intonation, let alone a word or a sentence. Like, you have to abide everything in the text. And that's not to be a dictator or to inhibit the actor's creativity of expression, but it is so that everything you need to know about your character is in the text. And once you know, learn it, live with it, feel how it, you know, lives within you, and then how it comes out, that is how the character appears to the audience. I think he actually said that, like, the notion of character is what the audience sees and what they infer. It's not you saying, oh, I am now the character or of this person. Character is something that is perceived by the audience. So this means that kind of ideology would rule out methods like, or rehearsal techniques such as like hot seating, or, you know, extended improv and things like that, because let alone like going into a backstory. If, you know, some teachers have been like, oh, what do you think, you know, happened to your character when they were like 15, or, you know, are their parents still together, and all this, you know, all these things that, yeah, anyone could kind of make like an estimated guess. But if it's important to your character and the story, it will be in there some way. It will be referenced, it will be talked about. If it's not, it's because it's not important, and it's not going to make your understanding or your performance any more effective. And that's, as soon as I heard that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense. And then obviously as my training went on, that's something that I found to really resonate with me, because I didn't feel the need to like, oh, I feel, you know, I don't understand this about my character, oh, I need to do some hot seating, you know. And that's not diminishing anyone who, you know, happens to love hot seating. Like, it can be great fun, but it's not
not necessary. It's so interesting you say that, because in college we were, you know, massively into hot seating and mind mapping and and I would spend hours and hours absolutely dissecting every detail. I'm very famous in my class for even buying a perfume for a character in a play. I was in a store and I thought, he would wear Christian Dior. So I spent £60 and my classmates were,
I mean, Dior like do a great like perfume, so like, I don't blame you.
Obsessed, and that's how I would get. And then years after I graduated, just before I was directing a play, I saw a workshop advertised at Acting Coach Scotland on text or script analysis. And I thought, ooh, that would be interesting, to come from as a director for the first time. And they exactly said what you just said. Yeah. Everything you need about the character is in the text. From that moment on, my post-it notes went out the door with my little pens, like no need. I thought, oh my God, I've just spent hours and hours saving, time, because I don't need to dive and dissect because everything's in the script.
Because no, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, when you feel something, so the text, you're no longer diving, deep diving. However, something happens. Say you're having an audition on Zoom. Maybe Zoom decides to update, as it really annoyingly can do.
Yeah, or Wi-Fi or anything. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So when your character is inside, or when you're acting from the inside out, and then these external things are maybe happening, is that maybe where practicing would help? Because no, I'm okay, I've got this. Because if those emotions, like the negative, the stress, take over, could that impact, do you think?
I think absolutely. And I think obviously every circumstance is different. Like the biggest thing, as you said, is what is the environment? Is it a Zoom? Is it a self-tape? Well, obviously if it was a self-tape, you could just, start again and no one would know. Or is it an in-person live audition in the room? It definitely is. It's a spectrum, because it's something as say if there was a lag on Zoom, for argument's sake, or if you suddenly start hearing feedback. So if you're the one, if I'm performing and I'm doing a monologue or whatever, and I can sort of hear something going on, or maybe someone stood outside my window, that would obviously naturally register with anyone, because we're human. But I would argue that through that practice and that preparation and that total comfort with the text and your audition, I would argue that wouldn't be enough to take you out of it fully, in so much to stop your performance. However, if you were in a live audition I'm stood across from the panel, and then let's say someone accidentally walks into the studio because they didn't realize auditions were going on, that is something that would take my attention away, and the whole panel. Absolutely it would. You could be the best actor in the world, and I'd be very surprised if you didn't break because of that sudden noise. So in a circumstance like that, where it does undeniably interrupt your performance and your moment and your truth and everything, I think that it would be pretty much very, very logical if the panel, whoever's auditioning you, would allow you to restart. Because it's always in their best interest to see you give your best performance. And if it's something that is outside of your hands and their hands, and it was just a terrible case of bad timing, any actor would be fully within their right to be like, I'm so sorry, could I please restart? And I'd like to think that the panel would say yes, but obviously that might not be the case in some instances.
Timing and all that stuff. Interesting, isn't it? Because I guess so maybe the practice in that sense could be the preparation, not that anything could happen. I have to prepare myself for everything, because first of all, but also I wonder if that's a little bit negative, instead of living absolutely in faith that all will be well. But I also wonder if we could practice maybe mindfulness or bringing ourselves back to the moment quickly?
Absolutely.
The general,
Because
yeah.
yeah, because like if they do, whether it's on Zoom, you know, if they're like, oh, you know, we had issues our end, like, do you hear us fine now? Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, great. You know, go again when you're ready. That doesn't mean, as you know, kerfuffled as you might be, that doesn't mean stand there for a minute and try and prepare. So yeah, absolutely, I'd agree that
Yeah.
that mindfulness, that preparation of, you know, whatever it takes, whether you close your eyes, whether you look down, you know, and you go.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, undeniably, time is always of the essence, and you know they probably have a lot of people to see, and you know, so it's, if you are granted in a way a second chance, which is fully, you know, within the actor's right, then yeah, it would come down to being like, okay, it happened, I'm not going to let it impact my next go, and you start fresh and you go again.
Yeah.
And that, I would say that dexterity will only come from practice for sure, and probably time, because you know, everyone, like, no matter how long you've been doing acting, whether you just started, whether you've been doing it all your life, whatever, will have varying degrees of horror stories in terms of live performance or on set, you know. Forgive me for saying, but shit happens, you know.
Yeah, true.
And the way you get over that only comes with, as you say, being positive, letting it go, moving on, always looking up. But even if it is just like a real pain in the ass, and it means that they actually don't give you another go and they say, thank you, we've seen enough, and if you're unsuccessful in that one job, then you'll know for next time, you know.
Yeah,
it might not make it easier in that moment, but it will just add another strength to your arsenal, because if that happens again, you will then know. It's like muscle memory. You'd be like, I've been here before.
absolutely. And I didn't die. You know, I think we can give ourselves the hardest time sometimes. So, especially if you feel that you've really, you know, learned it so beautifully and you really got a connection with the character, etc. So yeah. So whilst my dog decides to join in the conversation in the background, excuse me, what do you feel, knowing what you do know about Meryl Streep? What does she mean about you can't practice?
So she says, so in the clip we're referencing, she says you can't practice acting, but then she says, to sort of counteract that, she says you can practice, or no, you can get ready, but in the end, in that moment of performance, it either happens or it doesn't. So where, because obviously I only saw this video recently, and it of course brought up all of the much older footage I haven't like had of her and all of that. And in the interview that I recreated, she said, and she was very like self-deprecating, but said that she has always been, and this was in 1998, so her views might have changed, but that she has always been very reluctant to give any sort of acting class because she wouldn't know what to say, like, truly. And you know, she's laughing through this, but she was like, I think a class with me would just be kind of like, you know, just feel it. And obviously that's a very, very like blasé perhaps thing to reduce it down to, but she means it. And she does go on to elaborate and say pretty much all of it is just deep, great belief in what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're feeling. And then she said it's like religious faith, because it like, it just is like, I mean, it's, you know, when you're in it, you're not thinking so how I would characterize like how I felt, and you have to, if you're on stage, obviously internally at your core, or I know that I'm Ava sat in this costume and I'm sat on stage, and I can see some of my family in my peripheral sat in the audience, I've got my friends around me, etc., etc. But when I'm on stage for however long it might be, that is not existent at all in the forefront of my mind, like at all. And it's not from me being like, oh, you are no longer Ava, you are the character of so and so. It's just when it comes down to that moment of performance, as Meryl talks about, you just like live as that character, because you're not thinking about, oh, and this comes from preparation and practice, of course. You're not if you're a professional actor and you've done the work beforehand, you're not thinking, oh shit, like what's my next line, or oh, was I meant to move over there, or okay, they're talking, okay, I've got to say a big monologue next, or oh, I get to be off now. You're not, if you're prepared, you are not thinking that. And if you are thinking that, then you're not prepared, and chances are you're not giving a good performance, because you're not performing. You're being you on stage, who is aware, hyper aware, that they are playing a character stood on stage. That
Yeah.
no.
But can the audience tell that, do you think?
I can tell that in some things I've watched, not in everything.
Yeah.
But in some shows I've seen in the West End, oh my god, what was it? It was called Madhouse, and it had David Harbour and Bill Pullman in it, and they were like phenomenal. But there was a female character in it, and I believe that performance, it was an understudy, not that signifies anything. But her accent was very, very haphazard, and I assume she was English, but the text was, I think, like Midwestern America. So that initially took me out of it, and then even not in performance, but in the rehearsal room. This isn't to say that you can't be confused about certain aspects of the text, or being like, oh, this isn't feeling quite right, this isn't sitting right. And obviously there's varying degrees of it. Like obviously if you're straight up like uncomfortable with what is happening or what you're doing, then that is, that's a whole nother thing. But through that learning period, and obviously everyone hopes that they have a great director, if the writer's able in the room, you have a great cast ensemble to support you, that's golden. But if you're still, for whatever reason it might be, because everyone's got their own things, but if for whatever reason there is a underlying discomfort or insecurity, perhaps even, and those things create hyper awareness, mm-hmm. Then when it comes down to being on stage or in front of a camera, that will come across. Yeah. I would say.
Yeah.
You might have people saying, oh, I can fake it. Mm-hmm. And that again is how I would categorize the outside in way of approaching a character.
Yeah. That makes sense. And maybe as an understudy, if it was their first time to go on, maybe it was more nerves than that inner faith. It's interesting that you said Meryl Streep uses religious faith. I use faith, the word, a lot. And I think sometimes the people think I'm very religious, and actually I'm the opposite. I'm giving my power to another being. I'm absolutely going in. Does this feel right for me? And I have faith that I'm doing the right thing. Unless I'm told otherwise, obviously, in an acting situation. It's really interesting. Sometimes I see a performance, a play specifically, rather than film, and I think that looks contrived to me. And I wonder if it's because of the reason you just said. They're not feeling it. They're going through the motions more.
Yeah, I mean that's something that of course you could, or a million people could, argue different things. Is it a case of terrible writing? Is it terrible directing? That because it's like, I think that you could say, obviously there's all of the other elements and disciplines of theatre, everything from sound, costume, all of that. But in terms of the character, I'd say it exists, for the actor, the director, and the writer. So if there was a iffy performance, the actor might say, oh, it's not me, it's shit writing. And then they'd be like, well, no, it's not the writing, it's the directing. So then you could literally play a guessing game of who's at fault. But I think it is, it is down to whatever situation it might be, and it might not be the same every night, of course, because an example would be like, if you were going on for a show and you stubbed your toe, like just in the wings, just before you're about to go on, and say it was a musical and you were a dancer in it, and you're like, oh, that hurts, but then you have to go on and do like a 5-minute tap routine, then that's a case of something coming up at the last minute that wasn't planned, that is unavoidable, it's happened, it's you've become aware of it, undoubtedly, but you have to go on. So then that's a case of the actor, which would come through discipline and preparation and everything, being like, right, I can still get through it and it will be fine. Maybe someone might notice like it's a bit off, but like you are confident that you can give pretty much just a standard quality performance as normal. However, like if before you go on, you like fall over like a weight or something, and like you sprain your ankle and there's a loud crash on stage and you literally can't stand up as they're motioning for you to go on, then that's something I would argue that you can't fake and power through to save the performance, or to perform, your performance. So that's obviously where it is kind of like a case to case
makes sense
basis.
Yeah, makes sense, because Doctor Theatre is amazing. Aren't they? Doctor Theatre has helped me on many an occasion, and I've literally I used to get really, really deep, bad barking coughs for years and years and years. And I was in Elgin Macbeth with National Theatre of Scotland in the community cast, and we're at Elgin Cathedral, these ruins, and beautiful. And I was playing the third witch, and we had this amazing costume and a gas mask. And of course, we're mic'd up, and I'm deeply, deeply coughing, thinking, we've got 5 minutes, to, before we go on. And I cannot cough through this microphone, otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm going to absolutely deafen the audience.
Yeah.
All I did was I looked up at these ancient ruins, and I just looked up, and I literally, I suppose, a prayer, for lack of a better word, and he said, thank you for taking my cough, and whatever else I said. And I swear to God, yes, you're on. Boom. I did not at all. And I thought, that is Doctor Theatre. That is whatever, the magic of energy. And on.
And it's like, and even though I use like a physical analogy, as in like stubbing your toe or falling over, you could also say it could definitely be emotional or mental, because if the subject matter of a piece is triggering in whatever way, or it brings up some sensitivity, there are degrees of that. So if it's something that is, you encounter early on in the rehearsal period, you have a supportive director and creatives, as I said, and it's something that you feel you can work through and not affect you as the person in order to live that as the character, then that's wonderful. However, if, for example, if your character is dealing with the death of a parent, and the night before opening night your father dies, then that is something that, yes, is an extreme, but does happen. And then I definitely feel that would be the individual's prerogative to feel how they could navigate that. And if they can't at that moment in time, then they can't.
Yeah.
And that is fine.
It's so interesting. In college, for one of our latter modules, we had to do a 20-minute monologue, and I decided to write mine, and I did it about leaving my husband in Tokyo and the massive turmoil that caused emotionally with me and my two young children. And I was backstage just about to go on, and I have never had this. And you hear the term knocking knees. My knees were literally knocking together.
Yeah, because it's real.
Yeah, and I was terrified. I was saying, whispering, hate acting. I hate acting. I effing hate acting. I was on and because I was petrified. And I guess it was because I was revealing me and facing any truth. And then of course, the curtains open and I went on and boom. And it is magic about stepping on that stage. There was no more glynnis and oh my God, I left my husband.
Yes.
There was none of that. It was boom.
Absolutely.
Actor. So I can't even articulate what that was or why. Can you?
Yeah. Well, it's as whatever as it sounds, it's the fact that you can't sometimes it seems you can't separate like the human from the actor. So I mean, I had a similar experience. A show where there was not my character, but my character was listening to another character talk about grief, and I had just experienced a bereavement. And I remember like when I was reading the script for the first time, and then in all the rehearsal like periods, I remember thinking, and it had happened like that week. So I was like, I wasn't saying anything like during rehearsal because it was someone else's, scene and speech and everything. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like how am I gonna sit on stage and actively be listening as my character, but how is that when it's hitting my character, how is that not going to seep through to Ava? And it didn't.
Wow.
It didn't at all.
And do you think it's because you can compartmentalize, or do you think there's another reason? Because not everyone, as you've said, would be able to do that, would they?
I think, I mean, I do compartmentalize like a lot in my general life. So I'm sure that is a factor for sure. But also I'm not telling myself to compartmentalize that. So maybe that signifies that there is another reason for it, in so much that it just happens naturally. And just as you said, even though you had all these like physical symptoms and you're like, oh my God, this is like impossible, I feel like I'm walking to my death, when you go out there's a snap, like in a good way. So but that's what I mean. If for example I hadn't done all of that work, I wasn't so sure of every which way of what was happening, what I was feeling, what my lines were, etc. If there were any of those distractions coming through from like Ava, then I would feel strongly that perhaps would create the like gateway for, if I was listening to sensitive material, for that to like seep in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like there has to be like a total shut off, because if there isn't, then it could mean that other things come in that you might not want.
Sure. So closing the door bridge, but it's not a conscious closing, would you say?
No, I mean, like I'm sure you have some actors that, everyone has a different process. Like some people might like to, isolate and lock themselves in a dressing room for like an hour or a day before the show and not talk to any of the cast, or they might be able to just be like, yeah, I'm, having a great time. Like I'm talking to my friends, I'm talking on the phone. And then as soon as like the call, they're like in it. And as soon as they go on stage, I think I'm in the middle, but towards the former, in so much that if there are unhelpful distractions that are not only not aiding me in my preparation and what I know I'm about to do and what's required of me, but it's actually detracting from that, then I will distance myself. Because that's just my own process. But I do not, I don't look in the mirror and go like 3, 2, 1, boom, or anything. It just happens.
Yeah. Do you think, do you still follow Meryl Streep's career?
I do, and I'm up to date on Only Murders in the Building because she's on season 3. I don't know if you've seen.
I keep seeing it all over, even today.
Glynis.
Oh, really?
I will so she's a recurring guest star for season 3. She's not in 1 and 2, but in the first episode of season 3, I might have to just send you the clip. In about a minute and a half, hysterically crying.
Wow. Because of her portrayal?
Also the subject matter. And I think when you see it, you get it. And then, but it was just so surreal because what the character was and what they were showing of the character, and then the fact that it was Meryl Streep, and I'm watching this and I was like, oh my God, like I feel like I'm being, yeah. But in the best way.
Yeah, because that's feeling, isn't it? So interesting. The bridges over Madison County, the hand on the handle, the car. It's and obviously beautiful filmmaking, beautiful cinematography. And this is why I think acting, or the performing arts in general, is just sacred, because it can help us feel so much. It can help us express. It can help us release. And you said about almost as if I felt as though I was dying before I went on for my 20-minute monologue. And what I realized is it was a rebirth, actually. It was an acknowledgement that I left. And you know what? I have discovered a whole new me because I left. It was, and that's incredible. So, through the turmoil, actually, what a gift in that. So it's incredible. Do you think Meryl Streep has changed at all, like acting wise or thinking wise? I wonder, do you think she'd still say she wouldn't be able to teach an acting class? Excuse me.
I think from the video that we're referencing, I'm not sure when that was, but it looked fairly recent. I'd say maybe like maybe not the past 5 years, but I'd say like 10 years plus maybe. I think that it does track. I think that her ideology and attitudes towards her own craft are staying consistent, because I think in the interview that I was talking about, the 1998 interview, she's asked, is what you do a craft? Is it a job? Or is it like a paycheck? And she said when it's at its best, she said like flying, and it's great. And she said that's the part I won't give up, and that's the part I wouldn't give up, even though I love my children and doing what they need me to do. I certainly also need to express myself in this way. That's literally like, I've just remembered my lines.
Absolutely. When I was in college, again, just started 2-3 weeks in, I couldn't find childcare. My children were like 2 and 5. And so I had various friends looking after them. And one of those friends, when I went to pick them up, said, you have to put your children first. You shouldn't be going to college. And I said, I will not get to 85 and blame my children for ruining my life.
Yeah.
will find a way. And I found a perfect way by having a living au pair that allowed me to work on the side and but study full time and be very present for my children when I was home. And
Yeah.
and absolutely, we sometimes talk about this. Why? You don't know if you'll ever get that back. And you've got to honor who you are. Before you're a mother or a father or a wife or a husband, you are yourself. Let's
Yes.
honor that.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you'll be buried in some way, and then what comes out? Resentment and vitriol, I think. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and like that's what she was talking about, because the where they filmed the interview was actually on stage at a theater in New York, because at that time she had just done, or was about to do, The Seagull, which I also talked about, and I compared it to Mother Courage in the essay that followed the IRP. So the whole context was, oh, we're doing this in a theater, and she says, because I haven't been in a play in 15 years. After that interview, she was on Broadway again, but she said about how it is, the fact of when, because she's got 4 children, I believe, that when they're young, the kind of time that is demanded from the theatre is not easily compatible with the amount of time one would perhaps want to spend with young children as a parent. Not to say that you could, but that's where she has said, I don't think explicitly in that video, but definitely in other research, I found that that is why she did so much screen work and continue to do so much screen work, just because of the shooting hours and the flexibility that can come with that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to honor herself. Can you imagine being the children of Meryl Streep? Like the pressure.
I know. You probably never want to do acting ever, because no matter what you do, you're going to be terrible.
And you'll always be compared. Oh, like horrid, like really. Oh my God. And probably even yourself. Oh, will I ever be like my mother? Oh my gosh, amazing. So with your training, if you look at your training and what you went through and the onus on script analysis, the people that love to practice self-tapes or just monologues for fun or literal practice, whilst I know that you're not going to criticize or condemn that, do you feel that's useful or no?
Yes, absolutely. I think because it's, it's about, you have to feed the beast, as it were, in terms of, if you are between projects, if you don't have this wonderful script that you've auditioned for and that you've been given to sink your teeth into, and it's going to culminate in a performance, if you don't have that at the present time, then it's about not letting that side of you diminish or die. It's about keeping that hunger satisfied, because it really is, because it is such an athleticism. Like I will believe this wholeheartedly, that it is a discipline likened to musicians and athletes, in terms of that rigorous training, like physical, vocal, mental, emotional, all of that. And that's not to say it just eradicates you as a person and you can never do anything else and never have any life outside of that. But if it is that integral to who you are, and you feel that you have to do this and pursue this because of what it does to you internally, and not because, oh, I want the accolades or fame or any of that, like that doesn't matter. It's about, I feel I need to do this because it's what I have always done and what I continue to need to do to feel some sort of way. And with that drive comes athleticism. You have to practice. You have to, if you do train, in a formal, you know, training facility like a drama school or whatever, classes, workshops. It is that discipline. And when you're out of that, so like when I graduated just been 2 years, it was a, you know, a shock to the system in terms of that rigor that I lived in and relished in is suddenly that, you know, arena, like I'm doing this whole sports metaphor, but that's suddenly absent. So it's like, well, I still want to train as an athlete and run the race, but like now I don't have anywhere to do it in. So how do I keep that alive? And absolutely, you do that and accomplish that by, as you said, doing, you know, monologues, table reads, whatever it might be, like literally just acting. Do you know what I mean? Like just,
Yeah,
you just do it.
because I think, you know, as an artist, as the actor is, and I love the sports analogy because I would so agree. It is, yeah, definitely. Because you get off stage or off a film set sometimes. I did a short film a couple months ago in which I just had to cry all the time.
Yeah.
And you know what? I was exhausted that night. It's very easy for me to cry, but I was exhausted because it takes work. And you're really,
Yes.
you know, you're pulling that out of your system. It's like, ugh.
Yeah, no, like yeah, my final show at Bruford was exactly that, like high emotional demands of, you know, in terms of voice, you know, like screaming, production, crying, all of that for like 3 hours and like 2 shows a day.
Wow, really? God.
And it was probably the best like acting experience so far of my life. But it was exactly that. Like, not to say that I was, you know, a method actor and I was being so regimented and like I didn't talk to anyone outside of it and I just totally went insular. No, but like when everyone went out to the pub the night before, my friend likes to, you know, ridicule me for this, but I wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And not because I was being this like fancy pants actor, like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to be alone from you all. No, it was because I was frigging tired,
Yeah.
you know? And I was like, if I'm gonna do this and be in at like 9 a.m. the next day to like get ready and do it all again, like,
yeah, you've been walking up the mountain. I've been sprinting up and down and around and up and again. Yeah.
yeah, and that's not to say that, you know, that's just what worked for me and what I needed at that time. It's not to say someone could have like do the same role, the same show, whatever, and still go out and do whatever afterwards or between shows. But for me and my discipline and knowing what is required of me in order to perform the next day, that did not come from going to the pub every night.
That was a kindness to you, that self-care. Yeah, I really appreciate that you recognize that for yourself. So well done, you. Any final words or thoughts on this whole thing? And do you think people will misunderstand what she means even in this little clip?
I think if anyone misunderstands in so much that they think it is a negative or judgmental thing she is saying, I think that that's not the case at all. And if anyone thinks that, they probably are judging it themselves and aren't rewatching and be like, what does she actually mean by that? Because at the end of the day, it's what she believes. It can be separate to what other, you know, incredibly successful and talented actors believe. You know, so I just think that what it speaks to and what resonates with me, like if I didn't agree with it, or if I didn't be like, oh yeah, that's really true, I'd be like, yeah, I love Meryl Streep and I respect her as an actor, but like,
yeah,
I don't really get what she means there. No, like it just so happens that this resonates with me and what I have felt in my own practice, and I just feel it to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that.
But it doesn't mean that if those who don't
Mhm.
aren't to say that they are not talented or not capable or none of that. It's about whatever process works for you. We can like categorize them all and, you know, dissect them all, but at the end of the day, I think being an actor or being a good actor is something that you only have a sense for yourself, like internally. Like no one else knows what you think of yourself and your ability and what you do in a performance. So if whatever you're doing is working for you, fantastic. But if there is some disconnect there and deep down you think, oh, this isn't as truthful as it could be, or I'm not feeling this, like, why is that? Then perhaps use that as not something to say, oh, I'm a terrible actor, I can't do it. Of course not. But if there is the notion out there that there is something as magical and unexplainable as this deep truth and this deep belief and blurring the lines of that, then seek that out and find out how can you make that true for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way, actually, because I remember once asking someone in an audition that when I was casting a play years ago, I said, did you believe that?
Mm.
And they said yes. And very kindly, I trust, I said, I didn't. And that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think if they had been feeling that, I would have been feeling that too. You
Well,
know,
because exactly, like it's about, you know, when it comes to acting, and as I said about, you know, why is there this need, and it shouldn't come from external accolades or recognition or anything or validation. Ultimately, it should be from within for yourself. And yes, arguably, if you're performing, you're always putting in front of someone, but never for someone.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Nice.
it's for you. And if you know that question was ever asked to me in an audition, and I would say, you know, wholeheartedly yes. And then if ultimately I didn't get cast, I I could sleep easy, you know, because I would be staying true to myself and truthful to myself that I did my job as an actor. I came there, I told the truth, I lived as that character, and that's it. And then if I don't get the part, then that is, you know, as you say, you know, it's out of your control. It's something that is, you know, you can't attempt to, you know, reason with for whatever reason. But that's the thing, is like if you're in the room and you do it, as much as it would be nice to, you know, get the job, yeah, I always think that like is the work. And if I ever, you know, go to an audition and I'm like, oh, that wasn't, you know, that wasn't as connected as I could be, or that, you know, just wasn't hitting it at all, that would probably dishearten me more than if I didn't get the job for like a good audition, because then I'd feel like I failed as an actor doing my job, which is the audition, not getting the job, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
Because then it forces the question of if I was disconnected, I'd be like, what, you know, if I was connected, would they have given me the part, you know? And then you can get into a whole spiral, which I'm probably,
Yeah.
you know, I have the tendency to do, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. The audition is the job. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Time and time again, I will say that. You know, really. So that's so cool. People that maybe, do you think you have to be a feeling kinesthetic kind of person in order to feel the text or the character more, or not necessarily?
I think initially I'd argue not necessarily, because you could say that text work, and if it is at its, you know, base level, being sat at a table, reading a script at a table read, or making notes and highlighting and all that stuff, when it's not up on its feet, then that is something that is kind of unarguably intellectual and text based. And you know, if anyone that method of working, if they're like, oh my God, I can't wait to just get up on my feet and do something, and not like query why that word is before that word. You know, some people have that learning style. So I would argue that to get the feeling, it's not solely, you know, kinesthetic and being on your feet. Yeah. Because, well, yeah, I keep going back to this whole, it's like chicken or egg, because before you get to that, you have to do that, I would argue. And that's what I've always found and done and all of that. Because as I said, when that moment comes, whether, you know, you're stepping on or you're in a scene or whatever, that connection and that truth, that does not come, even though you've done all this text work in the beginning. I am not thinking at all of the text. You're not, because you're not, because when a character is talking to you, someone else is on stage talking to you, you're hearing those words that they're saying as if you're hearing them for the first time. And even though you've probably heard them a million times, you have to, you're hearing them as if you're hearing them for the first time, you're thinking about them, they're affecting you, you're reacting, and then that prompts your response, whether it's verbal or not. So that kind of, which is kinesthetic, I'd say, but it all marries together. I think you can't have an effective actor or performance from an actor that is solely like rigid in the text and the literal and all of that, but then it might not be as effective if it's all like wishy-washy and you paraphrase, because that makes life hell for everyone on stage, because you have practical things such as cues and, you know, all of that stuff. So I'd say that it's a combination.
Yeah, so interesting. Do you think there's any tips for someone, or for those people who are maybe a little bit disconnected from their feelings, or who are more shut down emotionally?
I think, I mean, myself, even though I would say that, even though, you know, I'm me and whatever I perform is going to be something to do with me because of who I am and how I perceive the text and what responses I give. But I am naturally very empathetic, in so much that I, even if it's perhaps beyond my, you know, control, get very, you know, sometimes very upset about things. And even if it's not my own experience, it's like other things have the power to impact me, even if I don't want it to. And that, you know, sometimes it drives me crazy. So if anything, I'm practicing like disconnecting, you know, so as contradictory as that might sound to our whole discussion, but that's me in my, like, I'd say in myself, in my everyday non-actor type. But if that does, in fact, that ability, or maybe that increased ability to naturally empathize, if that lends itself to my openness with whatever the text might be throwing at me, whatever is required of me emotionally, I'm sure there is a connect there. And if there are actors who aren't as naturally open to that empathy as themselves, then it's, yeah, it wouldn't prohibit you from connecting to text, because, you know, every text is different. But I think how you could tackle it on like a practical level is, okay, am I relating to this text? What am I not relating to? What is it about the disconnect? What line is it? What circumstance is it? What scene is it that is just creating that blockage?
Yeah.
And when you find that, because it, you know, you should be able to find that, because if you can't, then maybe you're just uncomfortable with the notion of acting and being anything other than what you are, you know? So that's completely viable possibility. But once you find that which is providing the source of the disconnect, then it is working on it, it's confronting on it, hopefully with the aid of, your director, as you said, like sometimes it doesn't have to be like, you know, emotional or triggering topic material. Sometimes it could just be getting your mouth around the order of the words, and you keep like fumbling and you're like, oh, I can't say this. You know, I've been in so many rehearsal rooms where it's just, you know, you've had people like pulling their hairs out because they're like, I can't say the words in this order. It sounds unrealistic. Like it doesn't make sense. I would never talk like this. And that's the blockage. Sometimes it is as literal as that. And then depending on the text, depending on the director and the writer, if there is a genuine and truthful reason to alter text, like change some of the words, if it gets to that point, then you would hope that they would do that. Or if it is something like Mamet or Shakespeare, where people will know if a single word is different, then it is doing the work to figure out how can I make it feel right and truthful in me.
Yeah, brilliant.
And sometimes I've been in shows where directors with the like dialect coach will suggest, and then it ends up whatever actor changing the accent of the character to one that sounds more natural to their ear and provides, you know, the intonation needed to say those words in that order and to provide that connection. Because then once they have that and that barrier's gone, then they're saying that text as if it's like conversational.
Yeah, I love that. Just breaking down, okay, where's the blockage? That's this is so I keep, you know, you've just brought up so many memories of college for me. I remember saying to my college tutor, Alan Waters, who just I absolutely bowed down to and honor deeply. I said to him, acting, I'd only been there, oh gosh, maybe 5 days. Acting is like holding a mirror up to how I act in daily life, as in how I go through my life. And he said, oh yes, it will do that to you. And I said, and I don't like the way I act. And I recognized that I had been putting on an act in life. I'm all right, I'm fine, I don't get hurt, blah, 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 blah. I don't feel, you know, armor, actually.
Yes.
And it's been acting that has taught me and my children, but really acting that I honor for that too, to reveal, okay, I can be vulnerable and it's still okay, you know, and I don't, and I'm softer. I don't have to be hard and cold and put up barrier. It's just such a gift, actually.
And that vulnerability for me is in turn powerful. Not power like, oh, I now have power over people, but it's I've never I just couldn't like do something that I didn't like. I can't imagine anything worse in the world, like being stood on stage and being like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't like it, I don't get it, you know, I'm so disconnected, I'm self-conscious, like that to me is not the thing at all. Like that is what you should seek to avoid as much as you can, because in that exposure, vulnerability, all of that, like that's where it comes from. That it makes people connect, you know, how you're saying about the undeniable importance of the arts is through that. It's almost like, you know, you have to be, you know, raw and vulnerable and truthful to give that performance. And that's the only way the audience is going to derive any sort of meaning from it, you know. Because you know, you're one part in a play telling a story, and the impact of that story or the reason behind that story or the message could be X. So yeah, you could have no lines, you could be stood on stage for like a minute and have no lines, you just do a look, but every single person on that stage and off stage, of course, is key in conveying that story. And if one person isn't doing a part through that connection, it's only internal, it's only what's going on like in here, then it creates a disconnect, and it does a disservice in a way. I don't mean that harshly, but it's a disconnect for the overall piece.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's absolute great power in vulnerability. And it's so ironic for the people who are scared to allow themselves to be vulnerable. It's, you know, because then, a bit like me before, you don't then need to be putting on an act. You can admit that you're scared, and that's okay. That's the key.
Yeah, like it's exactly that. Like every single actor has the right to express those concerns, express those discomforts in the rehearsal room, and be like, you know, it's not working. Like I'm just not feeling it, like for whatever reason. And then, as I said, you find a way to get to that point. And that's happened to me, you know, many times. Even if it's, you know, no matter where it comes, if I know something's required of me, either I'll be like, yep, I get it, like, let's go. Or there have been like little instances where I've been like, I need more time on that. I need to sit with that more. That needs some more uncovering, if you will, to find out how it's true for me. Because chances are, you know, definitely in a training environment in drama school, you're going to be playing and studying and living as characters that are very, very different to you in terms of walks of life. So that it has to come from somewhere. That relation and that realness has to come from somewhere, and you have to figure out how.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that you know yourself so well, you know, and I love that you've got so many stories inside, and that you love sharing other people's too, from a great truth. And I just want to thank you for being so amazing. And it's just been so magical and just beautiful to explore this tiny.
Yeah, this has been like, you know, I've never been asked, you know, opinions like this, even though I have these opinions and I share them to people in my life, whether they like it or not. But to have this conversation is kind of like, yeah, it's exposed a lot of depths that I'm like, yes, I do feel this way, and yes, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I remember this exists in my, you know, memory and my feeling about it, even though we're, you know, talking about a Meryl Streep video. What could be better? But it does, you know.
Yeah, I love that.
So thank you. This has been wonderful.
Really, no, thank you for being you. Just really appreciate you, and thanks for your time. Take care, my darling.
No worries.
Thank you.
You as well. Bye, Chris.
Thank you, babe. Bye.